The clink of crystal glasses rang out beneath chandeliers, a glittering chorus of wealth and ambition. The ballroom pulsed with energy, the kind of expensive joy that photographs well in magazines. Waiters in black vests wove between tables carrying trays of champagne, their movements rehearsed to perfection. I stood just inside the entrance, a step removed from the current of celebration, watching my daughter glide through the room in her engagement dress. Nancy's laughter floated above the music, light, genuine, untouched by the tension that coiled quietly in my chest. She deserved this happiness, Mr. Wood. The voice snapped me back. Derek Harrington, her fiancé, approached with a smile polished enough to belong on a corporate brochure. He had that salesman's confidence. His handshake firm, his gaze lingering a second too long, as if assessing value in every human exchange. "Glad you could make it," he said, tugging at the cuff of his tailored suit. "Nancy's been raving about how special tonight would be with you here." I returned a nod, my voice even. "Wouldn't miss it." His eyes flicked to my jacket, the one I'd worn for a decade. Something in his smirk suggested he catalogued it instantly, a data point in a mental ledger. He gestured toward a group of executives gathered near the bar, all sharp suits and clipped laughter. "Come on," he said, leading me forward. "There are people I want you to meet." We wove through the crowd, Nancy catching sight of me and flashing a smile. For a moment, she looked like the little girl who used to tug at my sleeve during school recitals, desperate for approval. My heart caught in my throat, and then Derek's voice cut through again, brisk and dismissive. "Gentlemen," he announced, arriving at the group. "This is Nancy's father, Porter Wood. He's—" Derek's pause was deliberate, his smirk returning. "Between jobs at the moment. A real free spirit, you might say." The laughter that followed was polite but sharp, each chuckle slicing deeper than the last. I kept my expression neutral, but the words pressed against me like cold steel. Free spirit, between jobs. The careful language people use when they think respect is wasted. The tallest of the executives extended a hand. "Good to meet you, Mr. Wood." His grip was warm, his eyes curious. Then he turned back to Derek, lowering his voice. "But not enough. Always good to see where our rising stars come from." Derek beamed at the compliment, oblivious to the sting in his words. My daughter's hand slid into mine a moment later, her fingers squeezing softly, a silent apology I hadn't asked for. I forced a smile for her sake. But somewhere deep, beneath the polished floor and flickering lights, something shifted. A quiet vow formed like iron cooling in water. This young man had no idea who he was speaking to. And one day very soon, he would learn. The night pressed on, gilded with speeches and toasts. Every laugh from Derek's table rang louder than the last, echoing like a drumbeat of self-congratulation. From my seat at the edge of the ballroom, I observed rather than joined, content to let the spotlight hover over my daughter's carefully constructed future. Nancy, radiant under the chandeliers, floated between tables, her hand tucked into Derek's arm. She carried herself with the grace of someone who believed she was loved. Perhaps she was. I wanted to believe it too. But then I saw Derek lean close to one of his colleagues, gesturing toward me with a tilt of his glass. The colleague's polite smile sharpened into amusement. Their laughter was quiet, but Nancy caught it. Her glance toward me was quick, almost pleading. As if to say, "Please don't hear this," I heard. The band struck up a softer melody, and Derek excused himself from his circle, weaving his way toward me. He sat across from me at the table, posture flawless, as though even resting required performance. "Mr. Wood," he began, folding his hands, "I wanted to talk to you man to man. About the wedding." I nodded once. "Go ahead." He cleared his throat, lowering his voice. "This is going to be an important event, not just for Nancy and me, but professionally. My boss will be there. Half the board, in fact, they'll be watching. And you're worried about appearances," I said, sparing him the trouble of softening the words. A flicker of relief crossed his face. "Exactly. You understand, first impressions matter. People like Walter, he notices everything, how family presents itself, how we align with the company's values." He leaned closer, lowering his voice into something he thought sounded like concern. "So, I'd suggest maybe upgrading your look. Something sharper than what you usually wear. It's just that. Well, you wouldn't want Nancy embarrassed, right?" There it was. Dressed up as care, dipped in courtesy, but still an insult. I let the silence stretch just long enough for him to shift in his chair. Then I smiled faintly. Don't worry, Derek, I know how to handle men like Walter. He laughed lightly, mistaking confidence for ignorance. Good, good. Because honestly, Mr. Wood, you've got nothing to prove. Just keep it simple. Stay in the background. Leave the networking to me. His phone buzzed, and he rose before I could answer, excusing himself with a wave and the faint scent of cologne. Nancy appeared moments later, sliding into the chair he'd vacated. She looked at me carefully, as though trying to read the temperature of a storm cloud. Dad, she whispered, don't take it personally. Derek, he's just ambitious. He doesn't always know how he sounds. I met her gaze. Sweetheart, ambition isn't the problem. It's how a man treats people he thinks don't matter. Her fingers fidgeted with the ring on her hand, twisting the band in nervous spirals. For the first time that evening, her smile faltered. The music swelled, and the party carried on, oblivious. But for the three of us, the father, the daughter, and the fiancé, the air had shifted. Invisible cracks had begun to form beneath the polished floor. And I intended to see where they would lead. The ballroom had thinned by the hour, champagne towers dwindling to empty glasses, laughter fraying into hoarse murmurs. I slipped out to the balcony for air, the night pressing cool and heavy over Chicago's skyline. From here, the music sounded distant, like it belonged to another world. I rested my hands on the stone railing and stared at the lake, black and endless under the moonlight. My reflection in the glass doors behind me looked like any retiree's grey hair, modest suit, a man past his prime. That's what Derek saw. That's what everyone saw. The door opened. Nancy stepped out, her heels clicking against the stone before she stopped at my side. She didn't speak at first, just followed my gaze across the water. Finally, she asked softly, "Why are you letting him talk to you like that?" I turned. Her voice was steady, but her eyes shimmered with something between anger and heartbreak. "You think I should fight back?" I asked. "I think you should tell him who you are," she said. "Tell him what you built. He has no idea, Dad." Her words pierced deeper than Derek's barbs ever could. My daughter, my bright, intuitive Nancy, had seen through my silence. "You know," I asked carefully. She smiled sadly. "I've always known. The papers in your study, the phone calls from Walter, the way you disappear into those old photo albums. You never really left Technova? Not in here." She touched her chest lightly. I inhaled, the city air filling my lungs with something sharp. "Then you also know why I'm quiet. Derek doesn't see me because he doesn't want to. He sees only what confirms his ambition." Nancy's hand tightened around mine. "But what if I don't see him clearly either?" The question stilled me. She was trembling now, her engagement ring catching the moonlight like a shard of glass. "Dad," she whispered, "if you expose him, I'll lose him. If you stay silent, I might marry a stranger. I don't know which is worse." The music inside swelled as if punctuating her confession. I studied her face, the daughter I'd raised on bedtime stories and hard-earned lessons. She wasn't asking me to destroy Derek. She was asking me to protect her, even from her own hopes. I straightened slowly, the decision solidifying in my chest like stone. "Then we give him the chance," I said. "Why let him reveal himself? Not in front of you, not even in front of me. But in front of everyone he's desperate to impress. His boss, his colleagues, the whole glittering crowd he thinks measures worth. If he crumbles there, you'll know the truth." And Nancy searched my face, her breath uneven. "And if he surprises us? If he proves he's better than we think? Then I'll welcome him as my son," I said, meaning every word. For a long moment, the city hummed around us, and the decision settled between us like a pact. The door opened again. Derek's voice, cheerful and sharp, spilled onto the balcony. "There you are! We're starting the closing toast. Everyone's asking for you." And Nancy wiped at her eyes quickly, forcing a smile as Derek approached. I stayed silent, letting him take her arm. But as we walked back inside, the vow I'd made earlier crystallized. The wedding would not just be a celebration, it would be a test. The weeks that followed blurred into a strange choreography of silence and performance. Derek visited often, always with Nancy at his side, his smile sharp as glass. He would ask about my daily routines in that tone people reserve for elderly relatives, half amusement, half pity. He'd mention his latest sales figures as if dangling keys before a child. And all the while I listened, patient, waiting. Nancy played her role with quiet strength. She never betrayed our balcony conversation, though I caught the conflict etched on her face each time Derek slipped in another careless remark. She was learning too, I realized, watching the man she loved without the veil of infatuation. By June, the wedding machinery was in full swing. Invitations were sent, fittings done, venues booked. Derek grew more restless with each passing day, the pressure of impressing his boss hanging over him like a storm cloud. One afternoon, he appeared at my house, his BMW glinting in the driveway. He stepped inside without waiting for an invitation, holding an elegant garment bag. Ormestre. Would, he began, all forced charm. I took the liberty of arranging something for you, a suit, custom tailored, consider it a gift, from Nancy and me. He unzipped the bag to reveal charcoal wool, sleek and expensive. A suit meant to disguise me, to mold me into something acceptable in his world. I studied it for a long moment before replying. Thoughtful, I said evenly. But unnecessary. I already have something to wear. His smile faltered. Look, it's not about you, it's about optics. Walter will be there. He notices everything. You don't want to look out of touch. I folded my arms. You mean you don't want me to look like myself? Derek blinked, caught off guard. That's not what I. Nancy entered then, clutching a stack of seating charts. She froze, sensing the tension. Derek turned toward her, his voice softening as if flipping a switch. Sweetheart, tell him. This isn't personal. It's about making the right impression for both of us. Her eyes darted between us. For a moment, she almost spoke. Then she set the charts on the table and excused herself, her silence louder than any words. When we were alone again, I lowered my voice. Derek, let me give you some advice. The people you think you're impressing, your boss, your colleagues, they measure worth in ways you don't understand yet. Sooner or later, they'll see you for who you really are. His jaw tightened. And who's that? I held his gaze. That depends on how you treat people when you think no one important is watching. For the first time, I saw his confidence flicker. Only for a second, but it was enough. He zipped the garment bag shut, his movements sharp, almost defensive. Fine, wear what you want. Just remember, this wedding isn't just about family. It's about reputation. When he left, the house sank back into silence. I walked into my study, closing the door behind me. On the desk sat the framed photographs, the awards, the incorporation papers that had built the life Derek now worshipped. My hand lingered on one frame, Walter and me in a garage, grace on our hands, fire in our eyes. Reputation, Derek had said. Soon he would learn the difference between reputation and legacy. And when that day came, he wouldn't be able to laugh it away. The wedding day dawned sharp and brilliant, sunlight splintering off the glass towers of downtown Chicago. The hotel ballroom shimmered in ivory and gold, a stage dressed for perfection. Guests in tailored suits and sequined gowns flowed into their seats, a sea of polite smiles and clinking glasses. I sat in the front row, my suit deliberately simple, well cut, dignified but understated. At my wrist, a pair of cufflinks glinted faintly beneath the light, small, platinum, bearing the logo of a company no one expected me to be connected with. The ceremony passed in a blur of vows and applause. Nancy looked radiant, her hands steady even as her eyes searched mine for reassurance. I gave her a small nod. It was time. At the reception, Derek came alive, champagne glass in hand. He worked the crowd with the ease of a man convinced the night was his coronation. He laughed too loudly, boasted too freely, his every glance sliding toward the corner where his boss, Walter Klein, stood conversing with colleagues. When the moment arrived, Derek seized it. He crossed the floor with Nancy on his arm, his voice pitched to carry. Mr. Klein, he said, beaming. I'd like you to meet my wife, Nancy, and her father. He turned, his hand gesturing toward me like an afterthought. Porter Wood. He's retired now, living quietly out in Evanston. Modest life. But, good man of course. The words landed like polished daggers, smiling casual, dismissive. Walter's eyes flicked toward me. For a breath, he didn't react. Then his gaze dropped to my cufflinks. The recognition was immediate, sharp as lightning. His jaw stilled, his hand rose. Porter. His voice cracked open the room. Conversations faltered. Heads turned. Porter Wood. The name carried weight, bouncing across the hall. Derek's smile wavered, confused. Walter stepped forward, gripping my hand with a force that pulled me into his embrace. My God. You didn't tell me you'd be here. What a surprise, partner. The room gasped, soft, scattered, like wind rustling through leaves. Guests stared, colleagues stared, Nancy pressed her lips together, tears brimming. Derek froze. His color drained, his fingers twitching at his glass. Partner, he stammered. Wet you? You know him. Know him. Walter barked a laugh, incredulous. Derek, Porter is Technova. We built this company side by side, 30 years of sweat and vision. Half the patents bear his name. The silence that followed was unbearable, and perfect. Derek's chest rose and fell in shallow bursts, the arrogance evaporating, leaving only raw panic. His colleagues whispered, realization slicing through the air. I turned, finally, to Derek. His eyes begged, pleaded, for escape. Respect. I said quietly, the word heavy as stone. Who'sn't something you tailor to a man's clothes, or his paycheck. It's what you offer because it's the right thing to do. And you've spent months teaching me how little you understand that. The ballroom seemed to lean in. Derek's throat worked, but no words came. Walter's voice, cold and decisive, cut through. Monday morning. Your resignation will be on my desk. The champagne glass slipped from Derek's hand, shattering against the marble. The sound rang louder than the string quartet ever could, echoing like a verdict. Nancy turned her face away, unable to watch. And for the first time all evening, Derek Harrington had nothing to say. The ballroom air hung heavy after the glass shattered, fragments glinting across the marble like scattered confessions. Derek stood frozen among them, his posture crumpled, his once perfect suit now an ill-fitting costume on a man exposed. Walter remained rigid, his verdict final. Guests shifted uncomfortably, torn between pity and schadenfreude. Conversations swelled in cautious murmurs, but no one moved to fill the silence. I stepped closer. Derek's eyes found mine, wide, rimmed, pleading. Not with the arrogance of a man grasping for power, but with the naked fear of someone realizing he'd built his life on hollow ground. Mr. Wood. Porter, please, he stammered. Don't let this be the end. I can change. I swear I can change. My daughter's hand brushed my sleeve. Nancy, torn between fury and love, whispered, Dad. Her voice cracked. She didn't finish the plea. I held Derek's gaze, letting the weight of the moment bear down on him. Then, with a voice firm but measured, I said, Walter, not yet. The crowd stirred. Walter frowned. Not yet. I nodded. Every man deserves a chance to rebuild, once. If this is Derek's, then let him prove it. Not to you, not to me, to her. I gestured toward Nancy, whose tears clung to her lashes like fragile pearls. Walter studied me for a long, slow moment. At last, he exhaled, his shoulders easing. Very well, he stays. But under your condition, Porter, not mine. Relief crashed through Derek's face, but I raised a hand before he could speak. This isn't mercy, I told him quietly. This is weight. You will carry it every day, in every choice, in every word you speak to her, to me, to anyone you ever think beneath you. Because now you know someone is always watching. Derek swallowed hard, nodding as if each word pressed against his chest. His arrogance was gone. Whether broken or tempered, time would decide. Nancy turned to me then, her voice trembling but resolute. Thank you, Dad. I smiled faintly, brushing her cheek with my hand. Don't thank me yet. Watch him. See if he learns. Then decide who he really is. The music tentatively resumed, strings soft and hesitant, as though even the orchestra sensed the shift. Guests returned to their champagne, though the hush of scandal lingered like perfume. Derek moved among them more quietly now, no longer the king of the room but a man under watchful eyes. I stepped back to my seat, lifting a glass of water instead of wine. Across the room, Walter caught my eye and gave a small nod. The kind men share when wars are fought without raising voices. Nancy danced with her new husband. Her smile small but searching, as though every step tested the weight of her choice. And I sat in the quiet satisfaction of a father's work, knowing that justice was not the spectacle of destruction, but the gift of clarity. Because sometimes the most powerful punishment is not taking everything away. It's letting someone live with the truth of who they are.